Okay, speaking of dark arts, VR and AR in the world of marketing and our world has clearly been overhyped and clearly under-delivered. And there's no doubt about that. Talk to anybody. Um, Stewart Rogers of VentureBeat has looked at this from many different points of view, and he's done the work. And he's actually going to interview Ryan Pulliam of Spec, who actually doesn't work in consumer marketing, but works in the much more complex area of training individuals, training teams. And VR and AR is having a significant transformative effect in the whole world of training. So this is a little bit different. What we're hoping Ryan is going to show us is how it actually can work and how it can transform. So I'm going to ask you to give a warm round of applause to Stewart Rogers of VentureBeat asking the questions of Ryan Pulliam of Spec. Thank you.
All right.
That goes down in history as the longest walk to get on stage that we've ever had, right?
Right? Yes.
Yeah,
Passed the
super
first
interesting.
test.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. We're going to talk about virtual reality and augmented reality as it pertains to training and other similar areas. But before we get into that, Ryan, why don't you tell everybody who you are and the name of your company, but more importantly, why this particular topic is top of mind for you.
Sure. So I'm Ryan Pulliam. I'm the CMO and co-founder of Specular Theory, and we are a technology company based in Venice Beach that creates immersive software applications, primarily focused right now on the defense industry. We're doing a lot of work with the U.S. military, so this is kind of how we got into training. It's something I'm extremely passionate about, and we're seeing a lot of impact in, and I'm excited to discuss the rest of it.
Awesome. And just so everybody knows why they picked me to moderate this, so as well as being managing editor at Grit Daily, I'm analyst at large at VentureBeat. I used to run their research arm. And actually my very last piece of research for VentureBeat was about virtual reality. And I was looking at it from a consumer standpoint. Maybe let's start with that. So one of the things that I noticed was, back in 2018, we sold 16 million pieces of plastic, either for us to put smartphones in, or for us to use as standalone devices or connect to PCs or PS4s or whatever was available. But one of the things that I noticed and I measured, I took the Google Daydream sales, because Google Daydreams by and large were purchased. People actually gave up $70 to get that device. Whereas the Samsung Gear VR was largely given away. So I can't use that as an indicator. I wanted to see where people actually spent their hard-earned cash. And while there were approximately 3.5 million of those Google Daydreams sold, the most popular consumer app was only 16,000 monthly active users and dropping every single month. Why is it that VR hasn't really caught on from a consumer standpoint, do you think?
I mean, there's a lot of reasons. I mean, I'm obviously incredibly bullish on VR, so I have no doubt that that entertainment will pick up and this will become a mainstream device. It's still really complicated to make. There's not a lot of great content. I think a lot of people do kind of try and blame the hardware sometimes, but the reality is like the way that it's advanced, even in the last 4 years, is just mind-blowing to me. I used to walk into meetings with carrying suitcases with cables coming out of it. Now I have a headset that fits in my purse. So I think the technology is ready. I think that you can do a lot of amazing things with that. I think there's still a lot of education for consumers of how to use it and trying to get the devices out there. And a lot of it too is, you look at those kind of the ROI or the KPIs in entertainment, and it's views. Like there's not enough headsets in the market to really penetrate it in a meaningful way. You can't really get advertising dollars on something that nobody is seeing. So I think that's one of the amazing things about training right now is like you have real impact. I mean, the ROI on virtual reality and augmented reality or anything, let's just call it immersive training, for big businesses right now and the military is you're talking about an ROI of saving lives, and you're talking about the ROI of saving billions of dollars. I think I read the mining industry, I think, spends like $7 billion a year just on injuries. So the fact that you can have this device and use this technology just to prevent injuries alone,
Right.
there's just massive, massive impact, and it's incredibly important from, I think, a business standpoint of shaving off billions of dollars that you could save in, but then the fact that you are really saving lives, you're improving employee performance, you're making people happier and more confident. So it's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think, from a bottom-up perspective, that's taking much, much longer than we thought for it to gain traction. But where you're sitting, top-down, and, in enterprise VR, and VR for good, and, for social good, for empathy training, for job training, it's actually been remarkably good. There's a lot of great case studies and great success stories at the top-down approach. What are some of the things that you've been involved with, and maybe you've seen, from other producers that have really inspired you? I might chip in with some of my own examples as well, but what's inspired you? Maybe give everyone here a flavor of, what this top-down training-based VR looks like, and why it's actually performing so well.
I mean, I think it's a lot of reasons. I think it affects everything just from education and the way that we learn and the way that we want to improve, our own performance at work. And as a co-founder of a company, being an employer and like wanting to really help your employees, I think that the facts are out there. Like, they've done tons of studies saying that I think 33% people retain a VR video 33% better than a regular video. There's another study that came out in Florida where they said the retention level was like 80% after trying one VR training session a year later, compared to 20% after 1 week of a traditional training session. So the fact that this isn't a projection, this isn't something we're trying to forecast. Like, these are studies that have already come out, and it's already proven to be efficient from every part of the business. Especially with the military stuff we're doing, which I wish I could go into, but I can say a little bit about it, is one of their problems is they've been buying these legacy simulators that cost millions of dollars. I mean, anywhere from like 10 million to 64 million for one simulator. So the idea that you can buy thousands of VR headsets and literally create thousands of VR simulators instead of one simulator, I mean, it's just a no-brainer. They also, with the simulators, the software is constantly outdated. It takes 7 engineers 7 months to fix 5 things. So by the time you learn the simulator, it's already not even accurate in terms of what you're learning in the aircraft. Whereas VR, you can change it on the fly. You can track things in real time. You can literally produce better, aviators, crew, technician, maintenance, trainers, like you name it, just people, much faster and much more quickly and much safer. So I think from the costs, resources, and time perspective, it's really fascinating. I think there's also been some fun examples of gamification. We were talking earlier about how FedEx was using augmented reality for their crew that loads the planes. And I guess there's like a lot of high turnover in this job. It's a really hard job to fill. So a way to engage the employees to not only shave off the bottom line, but also keep them engaged and keep them in their job was to gamify how they actually load the planes. So when you actually think about it, if you're not doing it correctly, the biggest cost for those planes is fuel. So they were able to find that they could trim off, I think, 20% or something of the fuel that they were spending every year, which for FedEx is a massive, savings cost. And the employees are having fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's been incredible stuff in medical, I think, when you talk about social good or just other impact and empathy, I mean, it's truly mind-blowing.
Yeah, I mean, the examples I've seen that really blew me away, from a health tech standpoint, there's this thing called Snow World, and Snow World to me is crazy. You look at it, and it looks like a really old 1990s computer-generated, video. It's nothing sophisticated about it at all. It's basically lots of snowmen throwing snowballs in an icy environment, but they put the headset on burns victims, and just 20 minutes exposure to Snow World actually kills the pain more effectively than using any of the painkillers, especially things like morphine and other things that you can get addicted to. So just showing a VR experience was better than using painkillers. The one that really blew me away, and I think this speaks to what you were talking about in terms of the immersion, the absolute immersion of VR in these environments. A production company shut down a shopping mall and recorded some video, and then they went away and post-produced that video. And then they put a booth in the shopping mall, and they hired a few actors. And two of the actors were playing mother and father, one actor was a child. And the idea was that the child would kick and scream and make lots of noise. And they were looking for shoppers that had that, look at that child, you know, their parents can't control that child, what kind of child are they bringing up? You know, that kind of reaction.
Right.
They would take those people, put the headset on them, and show them the post-produced video, which was an autistic child's view of a shopping mall, with all the lights and the noise and the tunnel vision and everything else. And those people now knew what it was like to be an autistic child. This was not a misbehaving child, this was an autistic child and too much information coming in. That resulted in a 400% increase in charity donations to the autism charity.
Yeah, and it's amazing because there's no other medium where you can literally change perspective. I mean, they've done studies too just on empathy, and imagine using employee training. I think corporate training, I think they spend $360 billion a year or something. So everything from HR and unconscious bias and discrimination and how to advance leaders in the workplace and things like that. They're even talking about VR being used in education for like the kindergarten now. They'll be graduating in 2030, and a lot of it is going to be about kind of having this sense of self-efficacy, and they're going to need perspective, and they're going to have to really be able to adapt because technology is changing so much. So in addition to coding, like the other biggest concern is having enough empathy. So the fact that, I think classrooms and textbook education will, eventually go away. And at this point, you really can use VR and AR to not only augment learning styles, which everyone learns differently and teachers don't have the resources to do, but they're also gaining entirely new perspectives of different cultures and around the world, and you can kind of hack the world's understanding in less than a couple of minutes, which is really incredible.
Now, VR by and large is still a tethered experience. We need to be connected to a device to make it really work. In the case of the smartphone versions, it's freer, but of course, when you've got a visor on your face, you can't really walk around too much. Augmented reality is getting there. The likes of Magic Leap out here, and people who've been focusing on things like training in the construction industry, like Dakri. They had the smart hard hat. They've shown some really promising introductions into what training might look like in an AR device, where you can walk freely around and have everything laid out in front of you. How excited are you about AR as opposed to VR, and what are you thinking about in terms of those devices?
Yeah, I mean, I'm incredibly excited about all of it. I kind of lump all the acronyms just into immersive technologies. So there's a reason our company name doesn't have VR at the end of it, or AR. We're not really held to one thing. It's just whatever works best for that scenario. And I think, in the future, we're not too far away of you're going to be able to go in and out of the headset pretty quickly, especially with like tethered, wearables, and just go from AR to VR. So I think just like anything, it's got to have a purpose. It's got to be authentic. And I think AR has tremendous, opportunities and advantages for particularly like utility type things or maintenance or anything that deals with that. Whereas VR is a lot better at obviously immersing you into situations or unknowns or locations or scenarios or danger that you otherwise couldn't have. So I think really just having both of them I can't wait for the future, because I think everyone's just going to be smarter and better and safer, and it's a really exciting time.
Yeah, absolutely. There's probably some people out here who haven't thought about using VR or AR for training at all. I think by now everyone's been exposed to some kind of VR experience. We've all tried it in a shopping mall or a game shop or at a conference like this, where you can try all sorts of different experiences out at a Collision. But
yeah, it's really. Sorry, go ahead.
But if you want to actually get involved in using it at a higher level, what's a good first step for everyone here? What should they be thinking about, and how much should they be sort of budgeting for and thinking about from that perspective?
Yeah, it's really hard. It's kind of like asking to budget a movie without knowing the script kind of thing.
Right.
So, there are definitely costs associated with that. But I think what's interesting about training is that you're already, corporations are spending billions on training, or they're losing billions because of injuries or things where employees, there's theft or some hazardous condition or heavy machinery breaks or things like that. So, it pays for itself. So really cost, which has been interesting, has never really come up, whereas opposed with consumer VR and entertainment, that comes up quite a bit, usually in the first conversation. Whereas I think the impact and the KPIs and ROI of training is just, it's so obvious. Think about even the military, they're flying some planes that can cost $60,000 per hour to fly. Right. And when you have to train enough pilots, just shaving off one flight for enough pilots could save hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's, I don't think, it just totally depends on what you want to budget for. I think it's a matter of just finding the right partner. Like, you really want to have the right VR or AR partner and someone that can really help you through the process and build something that's not going to get thrown away or have a different team on it that can, be a platform.
And does the process of putting that training together change wildly for VR? I mean, when people are putting together training courses, should they be focused much more on storytelling than traditional just how to do this tick box type environments? Is it much more story based? Do they have to have those kinds of skills?
I think it's both. I think it just depends. Obviously, storytelling would be a lot more relevant for HR and corporate inclusion and diversity type programs. Whereas, if you're learning how to fix heavy machinery or drive a forklift, that's going to be like more procedural. I think there are a lot of advantages, like especially things where it's manufacturing or military or there's crew and technicians, like things that have a lot of repetition. A lot of it too is it's the storytelling, but a lot of it is also building muscle memory. So a lot of, especially in those kinds of jobs and very dangerous jobs, it's not so much about understanding the scenario, it's really about how you react to a certain scenario, and a lot of that is purely based on you making the right movements and when. So it's interesting that I think the data from that will tell kind of its own story, which is also another completely stream of data that you never had before, because you can tell where people looked and what maybe mistake they made first before they made the right decision, and were they really stressed, and you can test their stress levels through biometric feedback, and it's really interesting. But yeah, I think it's both.
Fantastic. Listen, I wish we could talk about this for hours, but I'm afraid we can't. Ryan, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Please give her a warm round of applause, everybody.
Thank you.